اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا وحبيبنا وقرة أعيننا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. The Quranic theme that I'm going to be talking about tonight is nothing else but fairness or al-adl. And as I pointed out at the beginning of these sessions, at the beginning of the month, a couple of days ago, that the purpose for these sessions is a little bit different than what I've been doing over the last few years. I'll seek feedback at the end, and if it's not helpful, I'll do something different. But there is a difference between the purposes of the surahs of the Quran and the themes that umbrella, that these surahs fall under in terms of umbrella themes, and how those themes kind of tell a story, versus general Quranic themes. I mean, stuff the Quran talks about all the time. Quranic concepts that are repeated, reinforced, and taught time and time again. They serve as the canvas upon which the Quran is telling its story and drawing its picture and bringing it all to life. So understanding these Quranic themes helps a lot in your attempt to understand the Quran in general. It makes it much easier because you know that the Quran, you know that there's 100 points that the Quran is always trying to make. It's always trying. And then with these points, the Quran puts them together to make different purposes and themes. It's like the alphabet of the Quran are these themes. And then the Quran takes some of these themes for each surah and makes words and makes a sentence out of them. So knowing what these Quranic themes are extremely important for a mufassir and for a general person who wants to understand the Quran and connect with the Quran. Because you always know that the Quran is trying to teach one of these things. That's why any of these themes, you can find them in any surah really, in any part of the Quran. It's not specific to a surah. Some of the topics I taught over the last couple of years, a purpose of a surah, for example, on weekend mornings, I explained Surah Al-Safat. Surah Al-Safat is trying to talk about the idea of obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when the issue is of ghaib or you don't understand the wisdom behind it. That's a very specific theme to Surah Al-Safat. You're not going to find it elsewhere in the Quran. That's the only place you're going to find it, right? But the trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's wisdom is a Quranic theme. If that makes any sense to you. Trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a Quranic theme. Iman bil ghaib, belief in that which is ghaib, is a Quranic theme. But then putting the two together, or putting a couple of things together, is different, if that makes sense. So a surah has a theme and a purpose. Sometimes it's very unique. You don't find that theme repeated elsewhere. But Quranic themes are general concepts, ideologically being taught by the Quran all throughout the Quran. And I'm just choosing them for you and giving you examples from the verses that we're reciting with the intention of helping you maybe lock down some of these themes. If at the end of this month you memorize the 30 themes that I put there, then you will always have something to reflect upon when you're reading the Quran. Because you're always going to find in the verses that you're reciting some degree of preparation for the Day of Judgment. Or you're going to find some importance, some emphasis on avoiding being distracted, or any of the themes that we've covered so far. You'll find that there. So you have something that you can reflect upon if you don't know what the surah is actually talking about in terms of its compass, in terms of where it's trying to direct you, right? And that's okay. Sometimes you may not get the full idea of the surah because you have not studied the language well, but you can still benefit from these general themes. So tonight we're talking about fairness or adl. And adl is one of the major Quranic themes. I mean, if I were to characterize the Quranic themes into major themes and moderate themes and minor themes, then a major theme is justice, is fairness. The Quran talks about it all the time, and it talks about it everywhere. As in, it talks about the importance of fairness between people in this life, and it talks about fairness that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show people on the Day of Judgment. And it talks about fairness that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows people in this life, and the fairness that we have to show Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this life. It talks about fairness in every way. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not here to oppress people. He does not want to oppress He does not oppress His creation. And His creation should not oppress one another, and should never accept oppression. And that all of the rulings of Islam are geared towards achieving fairness and justice within any given community. And thus this theme of adl or fairness, which is easily followed along within the Quran. And I'm going to share with you tonight, inshallah, a number of verses that talk about them in a very, very meaningful manner in different ways. And the three sets of verses that are going to be recited in the three sets of raka'at that we're going to listen to, inshallah, tonight within Salah. The first one, in Ayat number 94, of Surah Al-Nisa, which is one of my personal favorites of the whole Quran. I grew up, for some reason, this verse stuck with me as a kid for a long time. It was something I continued to quote this piece, the piece of the verse that I'll point out to you, for a long time as a young person. And it just meant a lot to me, and I'll, inshallah, try and explain to you why I think it'll mean something to you as well. So the ayah goes, it says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِذَا ضَرَبْتُمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ فَتَبَيَّنُوا. Said, oh, those who believe, if you are to go on a conquest on earth, within earth, meaning you're going and the intention of your leaving is to go engage in a battle of some sort, meaning you were sent by the Prophet ﷺ to go and fight an enemy somewhere. ضَرَبْتُمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. الضرب هنا is not hitting, but rather it's like you're hitting your feet on the ground and you're walking towards a destination. And it's the simile here is that you're going, or the implied meaning is that you're going for battle. So the command is فَتَبَيَّنُوا. فَتَبَيَّنُوا has a couple of meanings. One of them which is to clarify, meaning seek clarification. Al-bayan is clarification. Al-bayyinat are clarifications, right? فَتَبَيَّنُوا is to seek clarification. The second meaning is to take it easy, meaning be cautious, or don't be hasty. Don't be in a hurry. Slow down. Now slow down, take a moment. Make sure that you know what you're dealing with before you make any decision. Right? فَتَبَيَّنُوا. So what is he talking about here, subhanahu wa ta'ala? Why this teaching? وَلَا تَقُولُوا, and then he explains a little bit more. لِمَنْ أَلْقَى إِلَيْكُمُ السَّلَامَ لَسْتَ مُؤْمِنًا تَبْتَغُونَ عَرَضَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا فَعِنْدَ اللَّهِ مَغَانِمُ كَثِيرًا. And don't say to someone who gives salams to you, says Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, meaning they are declaring that they are Muslim, for example. Or they are declaring that they are peaceful towards you, meaning they have no ill intention. And the second meaning, the latter, is more appropriate. Alqa ilaykum as-salam does not necessarily mean that they are declaring Islam. Alqa ilaykum as-salam means they are making a declaration of peace. This is how we greet one another. We say Assalamu alaikum, alaikum as-salam. I am telling you that all you get from me will be peace. I will not stab you in the back, and I won't harm you, and I won't do anything to hurt you. And then you say alaikum as-salam, say the same thing from me. You won't get anything but peace from me. So now we can actually coexist very freely, knowing that we will not harm one another, right? So the ayah is saying, be careful, take it easy, slow down, seek clarification, and don't say to someone who declares themselves as peaceful towards you, lasta mu'mina, you're not a believer, or we don't believe you, or we don't trust you. تَبْتَغُونَ عَرَضَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيا. You want some of the bounty of this life. They're going out for war, mind you. They're not going out on a caravan for business. No. They're going out for war. And they're being told by God, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you were to meet someone who declares themselves as peaceful towards you, do not question their intention. Don't question their intention because you want dunya. Because you're like, well, they're my enemy. If I kill them, I can get the bounty, right? But it's war. But it's literally war. Yes, even in war. So the story that's affiliated with this ayah is the very difficult story. You find it in the collection of Imam Ahmad and Tirmidhi and Abu Dawood. Now it has an authentic chain of narration, and there are certain aspects of it in the Sahihain as well, but without the details. That during war, Sayyidina Usama ibn Zayd radiallahu anhu was fighting, and one of the people who had spent maybe the last 10-15 minutes in battle with would fall, and as Usama was bringing down his sword for the final blow, the guy would say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Right? Usama's like, Ashhadu an la, what are you doing? The war has been going on for 3 hours. You tried to kill me at least 20 times in the last 15 minutes. Ashhadu an la, ashhadu an la, ashhadu an la. And he goes on, he continues the blow. And then he thinks about it later. And he wonders if maybe he shouldn't have done that. So he goes back to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and he tells the story. فَقَالَ عَلَيْهِ الصَّلَاةُ وَالسَّلَامُ أَشَقَقْتَ عَنْ قَلْبِهِ. When he said it, you opened up his heart and you saw if he meant it or not. Just ask, أَشَقَقْتَ عَنْ قَلْبِهِ فَعَرَفْتَ كَانَ صَادِقًا أَوْ لَا. You opened up his heart and looked inside and figured out if he was truthful or not. So Usama sat there quietly knowing that he was in trouble. Usama, when the Prophet ﷺ said that, knew that he was in trouble. He didn't know what to say. So قال يا رسول الله ما قالها إلا خوفا. He only said it because it was out of fear. فقال أشققت عن قلبه. You أشققت عن صدره. You opened his chest and you saw that that's why he said it. You're sure. فأسامة didn't know what to say. فقال أقتلته يا أسامة وقد قالها. You killed him and he said it. Like he said لا إله إلا الله. And Usama just sat there, didn't know what to say. أقتلته وقد قالها. You killed him and he said it after he said it. And he kept on repeating to Usama the same thing. قتلته. You killed him وقد قالها. And he said لا إله إلا الله. يقول أسامة حتى وددت لو أنني أسلمت الآن. Until I started to wish that I was non-Muslim before and I just became Muslim today, so that this sin can be forgiven. You know, when you accept Islam, your sins are forgiven. He felt so bad. He saw it in the face of the Prophet ﷺ, the degree of disappointment and the degree of disgruntlement. How could you kill him? How could you do this? And this ayah was revealed. تَبْتَغُونَ عَرَضَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. You want status, you want victory, you want wealth. That's what you want. That's why you're doing this. You want something for yourself. Because it's hard in the middle of battle to say, okay, يعني لا إله إلا الله, fine, take him as a, يعني, handcuff him as a asir, a prisoner of war, and then take him back يعني, to the camp. فَعِنْدَ اللَّهِ مَغَانِمُ كَثِيرًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a lot of bounty to give you. And then the verse that I think you should memorize. This is what he says subhanahu wa ta'ala here. كَذَلِكَ كُنْتُم مِّن قَبْلُ فَمَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ فَتَبَيَّنُوا. كَذَلِكَ كُنْتُم مِّن قَبْلُ. You were just like them one day. You were just like them one day. You were the same thing. You were one day, there was a day in your life where you couldn't care less about faith, where you had no interest in Islam or in deen, where you were not following the rulings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where you were not engaged, where you were not doing what you should have been doing. There was a moment where you were like that. فَمَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He bestowed His bounty upon you. In what way? By guiding your heart and bringing you back to Him. فَتَبَيَّنُوا. So how about you calm down a bit? How about you calm down a bit? Maybe you don't get on your high moral horse and start barking at people who aren't performing the acts of goodness that you just started performing yourself. Maybe you don't start yelling at someone for a sin that you just stopped doing yourself. Maybe you don't do that. Maybe tabayyanu. Maybe you're a bit, you calm down. Like alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted me, He saved me from what you're in right now. But I was like you one day. I was you one day. So if I treat you harshly, then maybe that's what I deserve to be treated. I wasn't treated harshly, that's why I'm here. When I was lost, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gently brought me back. Someone found my heart and brought me back. Well, you found someone who was in the same position that you were in. So what are you going to do? Treat him harshly. That's how you were treated. That's how you found your way back, through harshness, through difficulty, or through someone who calmed down a bit, who took a pill with you, who let you do your thing and found a way to help you out. كَذَلِكَ كُنْتُم مِّن قَبْلُ فَمَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ فَتَبَيَّنُوا. It's an issue of fairness. This is a very specific type of fairness. Being fair with someone whom you were similar to one day. Being fair with someone whom you were similar to one day. You were like that in the past. Be fair. Be fair. Treat them the way you would have wanted to be treated, or the way that you were treated. That's fairness. That's just being fair. Don't expect. See, older generations don't forget what they were like when they were kids. This is my problem in Masajid. Older people who get all upset about children don't remember how they were when they were children. And all I need to do is find an older guy, a guy who out-ages them. That's all I need to find, is a guy who's just older than them. And ask him, how was he when he was a kid? And then you see the person talking, and the other guy runs away. Because he doesn't want to be exposed. Oh, when he was a kid, Allah a'udhu billah. Well, there was a 65-year-old gentleman in the masjid who used to give me a hard time. And out of luck, his 85-year-old uncle came to town. And this guy gave me a headache with the kids all the time. And it's just the seer of Allah. I caught this 85-year-old gentleman. I asked him, when he was a kid, how was he like? And he told me things that silenced this man till today. Till this day, he lives in the city. He will say nothing about anything because I know about him. I have leverage on him now. I have full leverage on how he was when he was a kid. It's an issue of fairness. You're still the same. You haven't changed yet, ya Sheikh.
I just want to make sure.
It's not, Allah musta'an. It's an issue of fairness, of being fair. Be fair to someone who was one day in your shoes, You were in their shoes one day. You're like them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through His grace, through His love, He brought you to Him. Treat people the same way. How would you want? And if you said, no, I was not treated that way. Fair. How would you have wanted to be treated? How would you have wanted to be treated when you were in His shoes? You'll say what you say. That's how you treat that person. And that's just fairness. That's just being fair. Otherwise it's a double standard. Otherwise it's a double standard where I deserve to be treated this way, but they don't. Or now that I'm not in that position, now that I'm not sinning that way, now that I know the adab of the masjid, I'm going to hold everyone to that same standard, even though they are not ready to be held to that standard yet. Even though when you were younger, you weren't held to that standard either. Take that verse, that piece of verse, write it on make a piece of calligraphy of it and put it above in your house. كَذَلِكَ كُنْتُم مِّن قَبْلِ. Like that you were before. فَمَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ. And Allah bestowed His blessing upon you. فَتَبَيَّنُوا. So calm down and take it easy. And clarify things first. And don't get upset. Ask first about. Maybe the person who brought his kid home to the masjid when they're too young. Maybe this guy is a single parent and he's struggling. Maybe the husband is sick at home. Maybe they have nowhere else to go. Maybe you don't know what their story is. Tabayyanu, clarify. Maybe when you clarify things, you find out, maybe you need help. Actually, instead of coming against them, you actually find you help them because that's one aspect of being fair. The second group of verse that I'm going to talk about, that's going to be recited in the second set of raka'at tonight, is the hallmark ayah of adl in the Quran, of fairness in the Quran. This is the verse. If you ever are debating Islam with someone who's not Muslim, and you want to prove that Islam is about fairness, you quote this ayah to them. Because this is the verse to quote. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُونُوا قَوَّامِينَ بِالْقِسْطِ شُهَدَاءَ لِلَّهِ وَلَوْ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَوِ الْوَالِدَيْنِ وَالْأَقْرَبِينَ. O those who believe, be advocates of fairness, of qist. That's what qist is. Qist is treating others with justice and fairness. It's making a ruling that is fair. That's what qist is. Adl is general justice. Qist is actually the application of justice. And haqq is the concept and the principle that's behind them. So you have three layers. Haqq is the principle that generates adl as the ethic, and qist is the application. So those three words, if you understand them that way, you'll be able to follow them in the Quran easily with no problems. كونوا قوامين بالقسط, advocates of justice, of fairness. شهداء لله, witnesses to the importance of fairness for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You do this for the sake of Allah. وَلَوْ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَوِ الْوَالِدَيْنِ وَالْأَقْرَبِينَ. Even if that means you are going to bear witness against yourself or your parents or your loved ones or your relatives. This is a semi-impossible verse. I say semi because it's doable, but it's very, very hard. It's very hard for you to bear witness against yourself because of justice, because of fairness. Most people struggle with this. And if you're able to do it against yourself, you will struggle to do it against your parent. With this ayah, I always give an example, and it's a heart-wrenching, nightmarish example that I don't like giving all the time. But I give it just for your, because that's what the ayah is trying to say. The ayah is talking about something specific. Be an advocate of justice, of the truth, even if that means you have to bear witness against yourself or your parents or the people who are related to you. Imagine you witnessing one of your parents performing an act that is illegal. For example, they run someone over with their car. Are you able to say, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Ya Shaykh, tawhid Allah. Don't do that. Don't do that with your head. Because this is a hypothetical that you have to answer correctly as a hypothetical. Because inshallah you'll never be in that situation. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never put you in that situation. Say Ameen. You're never in such an ethical dilemma. But at least hypothetically you have to say that yes, I will always say the truth. I will never accept oppression. I'll be fair. As difficult as it may be, and I agree with you, this is why I'm telling this story, it's impossible. It's hard. Are you able to bear witness? See, in the courts of law, the law is put in a way where they don't require you to do stuff like that. They don't require you to bear witness against yourself. You're not forced in the courts of law in North America to ever incriminate yourself with your own words. That's why you can plead the fifth. If you're going to say something that's going to incriminate yourself, you don't have to say it. And they allow for close family members in certain situations. You can talk to lawyers about this. They'll give you more detail about how it works. The reason being is because for the majority of the human race, they won't do it. They won't. This is the verse that you have in the book of your Lord. This is what you read. This is what you're going to listen to tonight. Allah is commanding you that you advocate for justice and fairness. And you bear witness for the sake of Allah, even if it's against yourself or your parents. He said your parents. If I said this, you could have easily rejected it. Uskut ya Shaykh, bir al-walidain, you don't know what you're talking about. He said it, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's a free card for me. It's a green light for me to point this out to you. He said it, awil walidain. He is expecting that if you are put in a position where you have to bear witness against your parents, for the sake of fairness, that you will. As difficult as that is, wallahi, I can't imagine anything more difficult. How can you do it? It's your mother. How are you going to do it? I'll tell you how. The value of fairness outweighs everything else. When the value of haqq and adl and qist, when the value of truthfulness and righteousness and justice and fairness, when they outweigh everything else, you have no problem. And this is not talking about someone who doesn't like his parents, by the way. If you don't like someone, it's easy to bear witness against them. I'm not talking about people who have, I'm talking about the norm where you love those who took care of you. You love them. Deeply you love them, and you care for them, and you're willing to do anything to protect them. You're willing to take the fall yourself if you have to. Like you're willing to take the fall yourself and go to jail forever, but not your parents. I understand, and this is what most people feel. Allah subhanahu, read these first. If you don't like what I read it yourself. This is what he goes in more detail. إِن يَكُنْ غَنِيًّا أَوْ فَقِيرًا فَاللَّهُ أَوْلَى بِهِمَا. Whether the person that you're testifying against, that you love, yourself, your parents, or your loved ones, whether they are wealthy or they are poor, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is more worthy of you following His command than worrying about the wealth or the financial well-being of a loved one. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rulings are more valuable. فَاللَّهُ أَوْلَى بِهِمَا. فَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا الْهَوَىٰ أَن تَعْدِلُوا. Listen, he doesn't end the verse, like he could have ended it where I told you at the beginning, but he keeps on going. To drill this point in, فَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا الْهَوَىٰ. Don't follow the desires of your nafs. أَن تَعْدِلُوا. Going away from justice, going away from adl, which is fairness. وَإِن تَلْوُوا أَوْ تُعْرِضُوا. And if you deviate or you turn your back to this, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ خَبِيرًا. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what you thought and why you did what you did. It's an implied threat. Almost, this is like a pearl for you. Probably 70% of إِنَّ اللَّهَ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ خَبِيرٌ or خَبِيرًا is an implied threat. If you follow them in the Quran, right? Majority of them are an implied threat. That, okay, do what you want, but I know why you did it. And I know what you were thinking. And we'll talk about this later. If you're not going to admit it now, fine. We'll talk about it later. We'll bring you and we'll open it all up and we'll see why you did this. Follow this through the Quran. You'll find it extremely powerful. And this is one of the hallmark verses in the Quran that talk about fairness. Our deen is built on it. Our faith is built on the fact that there is not one person who is more valuable than another person. This is مَا نَدِينُ بِهِ لِلَّهِ subhanahu. This is what we believe. This is our understanding from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Almighty. That He created all of His children are equal. All of His creations subhanahu wa ta'ala are equal. Not one person deserves more than the other. And no one should be treated better than the other. And no one should be treated less than the other. And that fairness is why Yawm al-Qiyamah exists to begin with. The whole reason that we have the day of Yawm al-Qiyamah is because it's the day of justice. It's when fairness is going to be applied. Because in dunya sometimes you can't get fairness. Sometimes we're not being treated fairly and we try our best and we can't get it. So Yawm al-Qiyamah we go and we receive it Yawm al-Qiyamah. The problem with this is if you're on the wrong side of the story. If you're on the right side of it, then fine. If anta mazloom, if you're someone who's being mistreated, if you're oppressed, then Yawm al-Qiyamah is your day. It's the day that you will walk in and you will be treated fairly. And you will receive that which is yours. And all those who mistreated you will be held accountable. The problem is if you're on the wrong side of it. The problem is if you were not fair in your life. That's why the Prophet ﷺ, when he talks about the highest, people of high status, people whose da'wah, whose dua is accepted, people who will find themselves under the shade of the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all of these imamun adil. Imam is someone who is in a position of leadership. It doesn't necessarily mean, he doesn't have to be head of state. Could be head of a school. Could be head of a company. Could be head of a hospital, head of a home, a household, a masjid, head of anything. An imam is a head of anything. Someone who's a head of something. They are the CEO. They're the people who call the shots. Adil, if they are fair. If they are fair, then Yawm al-Qiyamah, the reward is very large, it's big. And they also find themselves in the right position. They're on the right side of things. Make sure that you take time and you think about this ayah. This ayah actually is one of the verses that exist within the Mithaq al-Umam al-Muttahida. The UN has quotes that it uses to establish the importance of justice and fairness, and this is one of them. You can go and look it up and see this ayah, and they quote طبعا the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam as he said it, but it's the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But I'll take it because I think it's worth having this there as a testimony that we have in our own book of how we view fairness. We are a qawm, we are an ummah that are willing to testify against ourselves. We will hold ourselves accountable. We will hold our parents accountable when there's fairness involved. When someone is going to be oppressed, then we are going to side. We're going to side by fairness. The Prophet ﷺ tells you, "Unsur akhaka zaliman aw mazluma." Stand by your brother, whether he may be an oppressor or an oppressed. فَقَالُوا مَظْلُومًا عَرَفْنَا. To stand by him when he's oppressed, we understand. فَكَيْفَ نَنصُرُهُ ظَالِمًا. How do we stand by him when he's an oppressor? فَقَالَ تَمْنَعُهُ عَنْ ظُلْمِهِ. You stop him from oppressing. You hold him back and you hold him accountable for it. Because if you allow oppression once, evil is a boomerang, it's a snowballing boomerang. That's what it is. You allow for one act of evil to go unaccounted for, not corrected, no accountability, no fixing of it. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and it boomerangs, and it finds its way right back to you. If it doesn't hit you, it's going to hit your family. And if it doesn't hit your direct family, it'll hit your descendants, but it will hit someone. What goes around comes around in this life, a part of fairness. What goes around comes around. So be careful. Be careful what you project into this world when it comes to people's huquq. The last set of verses that I'm going to talk about exist towards the end of the surah. And it's a passage where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Inna awhayna ilayka kama awhayna ila Nuhin والنبيين من بعده وأوحينا إلى إبراهيم وإسماعيل وإسحاق ويعقوب والأسباط وأيوب ويونس وهارون وداود وسليمان وآتينا داود زبورا." So he counts subhanahu wa ta'ala in one of the verses that have probably the highest number of prophets that are counted one after the other. Said, "Indeed, we have revealed to you, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as we revealed to Nuh and all the prophets that came after him, and we revealed and we sent revelation to Ibrahim, to Musa, and to Isa, and to Yunus and Harun and Sulaiman, the Asbat, the sons of Yaqub, and we gave Dawood a Zabur. Dawood had his own psalms that he read from. وَرُسُلًا قَدْ قَصَصْنَاهُمْ عَلَيْكَ مِنْ قَبْلِ. And certain prophets we have told you the stories of before. Meaning you've heard their stories in depth. وَرُسُلًا لَمْ نَقْصُصْهُمْ عَلَيْكَ. And other prophets we have never told you the stories of. There are prophets that you have not heard of. We know today that they existed because there are large faiths that people follow. Our understanding as Muslims of the faiths of the world, all of these large faiths, especially those that predate the Prophet ﷺ, not the ones that happened after he passed away ﷺ, but the ones who predate the Prophet. So I'm not talking about Scientology or all this other foolishness. I'm talking about things that predated him ﷺ. These were faiths that were started by prophets, revealed to by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then the teachings that they had got lost. Their teachings got manipulated by the hand of man. And that's how we see, that's how we understand Ahlul Kitab when we talk about Christianity and Judaism. They are faiths that at the time that they were revealed were correct. Musa alayhi salam and Isa alayhi salam taught exactly what Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam is teaching. And the Torah and the Injil carried the exact same teachings as the Quran carries today. There's no difference. But the hand of man manipulated the teachings, and then it ended up something that's different than what it was supposed to be originally. And we see the same thing for a lot of the faiths in the world. Whether it's Hinduism or Buddhism or Confucianism or whatever other faiths that existed, we believe that there was a prophet at some point that brought revelation, that taught Tawheed, and then it got lost over the time. Or else you can't really explain all the parallels you find in these different faiths. There are parallels that there was no way for people back then to actually communicate them to one another. Like the faiths that existed in South America and those that existed in the eastern parts of Asia today, people never really, how are they going to meet? Like, this is impossible. And yet you find parallels. You have a story of a man and a woman in a garden, a sin, accountability. After death, there's some degree of resurrection. There's a place where people get punished. There's a place where people get rewarded. There are details that are different, but the basic lines, the parallels are the same idea. We were here for a reason. There's a story to learn from. We are required to uphold a certain standard, and then there's going to be accountability at some point in the future, with obviously variations in how that's going to happen in depth. So that وَرُسُلًا قَدْ قَصَصْنَاهُمْ عَلَيْكَ مِنْ قَبْلٍ, and prophets that we have told you the stories of before. وَرُسُلًا لَمْ نَقُصُصْهُمْ عَلَيْكَ, and prophets we've never told you the story. وَكَلَّمَ اللَّهُ مُوسَى تَكْلِيمًا, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke to Musa directly. رُسُلًا مُبَشِّرِينَ وَمُنذِرِينَ, prophets that we sent to deliver good news. The good news of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's empathy, love, compassion, and mercy, and His reward. وَمُنذِرِينَ, and prophets that are going to warn people of a punishment that will be very painful if they don't take notice of. But why is all of this? This is why I recite the verses for this wording after it. لِأَلَّا يَكُونَ لِلنَّاسِ عَلَى اللَّهِ حُجَّةٌ بَعْدَ الرُّسُلِ, so that people don't have an argument to make with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after prophets. So you can't come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say, I don't know who you are, I never heard of you, I have no idea why you're making a big fuss about all of this, and I was not informed about any of this, and I lived my life because if you can come and make that argument to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you are pardoned. There's something called in Islam Ahl al-Fatra, the people who live in times or places where they have no access to prophecies, no access to teachings or prophets. These people are held not to the standard of Iman, and they don't get obviously the reward of that either. How they are judged, that is left to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I don't know. No one really knows, and we're not in a position to talk about that. Like I barely know how. I'm just trying to figure out how I'm going to be held accountable, what I'm going to do for my accountability. But the reason that he's saying this subhanahu wa ta'ala is because of fairness. Because he's going to be fair yawm al-qiyamah. If someone comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yawm al-qiyamah and is able to argue that I was never taught this properly, the way that this was presented to me was all wrong, and I'll show it, then he has a good argument, get out. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, I'm sending the prophets لِأَلَّا يَكُونَ لِلنَّاسِ عَلَى اللَّهِ حُجَّةٌ. So people don't have a hujjah. A hujjah means they don't have proof, they don't have a stronger or superior argument. When you and I are arguing, the person who has a better hujjah will win. The person who has the better argument, the better statement, that is the person who is going to win this argument. Going to win this discussion. This debate is going to be won by them. So when you come Yawm al-Qiyamah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's argument is going to be, I sent the prophets. I sent the prophets, and I sent them with teachings. And I sent them with clarity, and I sent them with bayinat, and I sent them with all that, with the legacy that He wanted you to learn, subhanahu wa ta'ala. لِأَلَّا يَكُونَ لِلنَّاسِ عَلَى اللَّهِ حُجَّةٌ بَعْدَ الرُّسُلِ, so that people cannot argue and win the argument Yawm al-Qiyamah against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because it's about fairness. He will not hold accountable. He will not hold accountable someone who was not properly taught. He will not hold accountable someone, subhanahu wa ta'ala, someone who did not receive revelation, who did not receive the message, who was not told or educated about any of it. He won't do that, subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it's not fair. So He sent prophets so that people can be accountable, so that there can be a possibility of Jannah. Just like there's a possibility of Nar, but there's a possibility of Jannah. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَزِيزًا حَكِيمًا لَكِنِ اللَّهُ يَشْهَدُ بِمَا أَنزَلَ إِلَيْكَ أَنزَلَهُ بِعِلْمِهِ وَالْمَلَائِكَةُ يَشْهَدُونَ وَكَفَى بِاللَّهِ شَهِيدًا. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bears witness. He witnesses what He revealed to you, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He revealed it to you through His knowledge. He knew what He was doing when He revealed it to you, and He knows what you received. And the malaika themselves also are witnesses of what you received. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only witness that is needed. وَكَفَى بِاللَّهِ شَهِيدًا. This whole argument, all these verses in Surah Al-Nisa are just there for that one purpose. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not hold people accountable if there's no fair argument for them to be held accountable. What is your job? To make sure that you have a strong argument. If you have a strong argument Yawm al-Qiyamah, you will make it. If you can argue for why it is that you behaved the way you behaved, and what, you're not going to be mistreated. You're not going to come Yawm al-Qiyamah and then find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala holding you to a standard that is impossible to be held to, or asked to do things that it was never possible to be done. No, you're only going to be asked to do that which was possible, that which he asked for, that which you learned about, and that's it. Which is where accountability comes into this whole story. We're going to talk about accountability towards the end of the month as one of the themes. If you are not properly educated about Islam, then you can make the argument Yawm al-Qiyamah that you did not know. But who gets held accountable for that? I do. So I have to make sure I educate you so that you cannot come and blame me for not knowing things, because I have to carry my own accountability Yawm al-Qiyamah. So we're all trying to make sure that Yawm al-Qiyamah we have our arguments so that everyone can be treated fairly. If you decide, well then, I'll just not learn, then that's on you. If you decide that you won't want to learn, that's on you. But if you come to learn and I don't teach, then it's on me. Are you understanding the problem with this? So everyone has to do their part in this whole story. We all have to do our part so that Yawm al-Qiyamah, it can be fair. Well, I wasn't able to help in this fact, in this aspect, because they didn't let me help. For example, if you're running a charity or you're part of a community and you're depriving people from the ability to do khair, then Yawm al-Qiyamah they can say, we didn't do this because Fulan, who was in charge, didn't let us do it. And then they can't be held accountable because it's fair. If you weren't allowed, then it's not your fault. We'll go see who was responsible for this, and they're the ones who are going to be held accountable because it's fair. But if that person's job is to make sure, nope, I made it all available to them. I made it easy. They didn't want to do the job. Knowing that Yawm al-Qiyamah we're going to be treated fairly should motivate you to do your best at all times and make sure that you remove any liability from yourself. You do this in your job anyways. In your line of work, you do this all the time. What are you thinking about? Can they sue me? Can I get sued? Can I be held accountable if this comes to a court of law? You're thinking about this all the time, as a physician, as an engineer, and as a lawyer, and as a contractor, and as an accountant, whatever you're doing, you're thinking, can this come back later on? And so in dunya, you're thinking, well, am I liable? Am I liable? Will I be in a position where they can prove that I didn't do my job, or I didn't actually inform appropriately, or I wasn't on? Why do you treat dunya that way, but not akhirah? Akhirah is the epitome of fairness. Literally, like in dunya, you can get away with things. You cannot be fair, but if you just get a good lawyer, or you just word it in a certain way, you can get off the hook. Even though fairness was not served that day. Justice was not served because you were. But Yawm al-Qiyamah, none of that is possible. There is no, what are you talking about? Get a lawyer, a better, it's all going to be up in the open. Why you did things or what you did is going to be repeated in 4K, forgive me. You're going to watch yourself. You're going to sit there with the malaika watching. Oh, you didn't do it? Forged? All right, let's go into the reality itself. Let's watch it. Let's watch it. Let's bring let's have the earth give its testimony. Let the clouds, let the sun, let the mountain, let the tree that was there say, yes, I saw him. He did this. Oh, they're all liars. You're the only one who's... We're going to find that in the Quran too, right? يَوْمَ تَشْهَدُ عَلَيْهِمْ سَمْعُهُمْ وَأَبْصَارُهُمْ وَجُلُودُهُمْ. When their eyes bear witness, and their skin and their ears, like when you lie enough Yawm al-Qiyamah, then your organs will speak. No, he did it. I was there. وَقَالُوا لِجُلُودِهِمْ لِمَ شَهِدتُّمْ عَلَيْنَا. Why did you bear witness against us? You're going to burn with us. قَالُوا أَنْطَقَنَا اللَّهِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us to speak, so we spoke. وَذَلِكُمْ ظَنُّكُمُ الَّذِي ظَنَنْتُمْ بِرَبِّكُمْ أَرْدَاكُمْ. But that assumption that you had of your Lord, that He would not hold you accountable, that there was not going to be justice Yawm al-Qiyamah, is what ruined you. You went through life thinking you could get away with stuff. You can't get away with anything. You can't ruin the fabric of the universe. You can't scrumple it and think it's not going to reflect back and slap you in the face. It's going to. So be fair. Be fair. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is covering the bases by sending prophet after prophet after prophet, messenger after messenger everywhere, repeating similar messaging, repeating similar ethics and similar values and similar principles, calling upon humanity to think and to revise their stances and to reassess what they're doing in their lives, and asking and telling them that the day will come, the day of resurrection is coming soon, and you'll be held accountable, and there's fairness. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making sure that He will be able to argue against those who come and say we didn't know, by sending prophets. This is the purpose. لِأَلَّا لَامِ التَّعْلِيل here. I mean, this is the reason why He sent them. رُسُلًا مُبَشِّرِينَ وَمُنذِرِينَ, sending all these prophets that bring good news and that warn people. لِأَلَّا يَكُونَ لِلنَّاسِ عَلَى اللَّهِ حُجَّةٌ بَعْدَ الرُّسُلِ. So no one can come and say, I didn't know. because it wouldn't be fair if they did. And this is one of the Quranic themes. One of the major Quranic themes is fairness or justice. So make sure that you observe it in your life. And understand that you are required to stand by justice and by fairness in every moment in your life. You're always required. Whether it's fairness of seeing someone who was once, whom you were similar to once, whom you were as weak and as wrong as they were, or they are right now. So treating them fairly, treating them the way you were treated or the way you think someone like that should be treated if you were in their position. Whether it's fairness of saying the truth when it's going to harm you or harm a loved one or harm someone that you care for, because the truth is so valuable. So you have to be fair, so you're going to be fair even if it's going to take something from yourself. Or whether it's understanding that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put this story together the way He did to make sure He was fair. So that Yawm al-Qiyamah you don't feel that you were mistreated. I'm going to tell you of the scariest thing that happens on the Day of Judgment at the end of this session. Here, listen to this. Not one person, listen, enters Jahannam Yawm al-Qiyamah feeling oppressed. Not one person goes to Jahannam Yawm al-Qiyamah feeling mistreated. They're sad, they're upset, they wish for more, but they don't feel oppressed. I'll leave you with that and we'll continue inshallah tomorrow. Subhanakallah bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak.